So I'm really psyched to be able to bring you my interview with David Ellefson. He's obviously the bassist with Megadeth and a co-founding member, but also is an incredibly prolific player and businessman who knows the music business, who has a ton of different business opportunities that he works with and other musical projects. Dave was really generous with his time and filled us in on what he has coming up and what he's currently working on. And we covered topics that spanned everything from building a career in music, being a competent player, technique, gear, songwriting, composition, a ton of information, absolute treasure trove. There's also a patron segment where Dave went on further for a while and talked about deeper composition concepts and some information on his project with Frank Bello. If you want to get that, please join me down on the patron pages. Links down below for Patreon and Subscribestar. And there's also links to his profile, which this is a follow-up to, that I did for Metal Bass Microscope, and my analysis of the two songs from the P-Cells album, My Last Words and The Conjuring. We also discussed that in the patron-only segment. So, links to everything down below, and with that, let's get at it.
We have him here, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. David Ellefson. Thanks so much for coming on, man. Really appreciate it.
Yes, Rodney. How are you, my friend?
Doing well, doing well.
Good.
Again, I really appreciate your time. You probably come up on the channel at least once a week or per show. It's you're a huge inspiration and influence to a lot of the players. So I know hearing some stuff directly from you be a big thing.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, to get started, and again, because you have so many projects and pretty prolific artist, what's coming up with you currently, and what are you working on right now?
You know, me and Jeff Scott Soto began collaborating on some stuff back around late January, and we wrote together. God, it's about 17 songs. We just mixed 15 of them, and I think we're done. I think we're good.
Got it.
To do the embodiment of a record, which is now essentially done, complete, and ready to go.
Wow.
Management came on board, an agent came on board, so it just all fell into place. It was really nice. You know, I've gotten used with a lot of these things in recent years to somewhat managing them myself. With me having my own record label and having contacts to other labels and stuff. So I kind of know, okay, this one needs to go out here. This one I can do in-house. And it's not, I'm not going to lie, it's nice having the label because I can do things in-house, and, the days of going out and trying to find some big check, it used to be big check wins, you know what I mean? Take their money and make the record. But I think quality is the most important, and things are so relational on social media right now. Like this, look, you came right to me. We set this up, and I try to be approachable. I it's funny. There's two guys here. One is David Ellefson, the rock star, the bass player. That guy, and then over here is another guy named David Ellefson, who sort of looks after this guy, David Ellefson over here. And I've gotten pretty good at it because I can kind of separate myself from it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's, as I sit in the office this way, I'm the rock star. As I move my laptop and sit over there and I'm writing songs and I'm taking care of business and going over contracts, I have my, my business hat on and you know what I mean? So it's kind of like I manage a guy that I also am at other times. And I think, look, I can do it because I've been in the business so many years. I mean, look, I'm 56. I've been doing this since I was 11. You know what I mean? Wow. It's like I'm under no delusions or pretenses. Maybe that's why the good Lord put a bass in my hand, because that's kind of the role of the bass generally in the band, is to be this glue. But yet I get to also be the songwriter. I get to now have my name on the door. In Megadeth, I'm a member amongst members. With Ellefson, it's my name on the door. With Ellefson Soto, I'm a collaborative name on the door with another iconic musician, singer, with Jeff Scott Soto. So I kind of get to do all of it. And not gonna lie, I couldn't be happier.
That's fantastic, man. That's something I'd love to touch on, because we talk a lot about not just musicianship on the channel, but how to actually develop a career as an artist. And I try and warn a lot of people about some of the pitfalls of it and everything. you've got so many projects going on and things. I think a lot of people don't take that extra step of understanding of it's one thing to be a great bassist, but you have to be somebody that people want to work with and someone who, gets that across. So are there any things that you feel have facilitated this career path for you where you're able to work and do so many things?
Well, I was raised by a good family. So they get all the credit for all the good stuff that happens to me. And when I mess stuff up, that's on me. Okay. So you can thank my parents and the Lutheran church and all the, the small town of Jackson, Minnesota. And, the good people who raised me, they did a good job. But here's the thing, man. You jump in, you just go for it. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to piss some people off. You're going to make some messes. You're going to have to make some amends. You might be in some legal troubles a time or two. Hey, welcome to business. A friend of mine who's a home builder lives literally right down the street from me. And he said, he goes, I was in a litigation thing. And he goes, welcome. You finally arrived in the world of business. You're not really in business until you've been sued, a time or two. And he laughed because he goes, look, in the home building business, as soon as you pound a nail in someone's house, you're going to get sued. You know what I mean? And so every industry has its nuances, you know what I mean? And of course you don't want to have to, go through those processes if you can help them. But the truth of it is, we all sign agreements that we probably shouldn't have, or we should have had maybe closer attention or a lawyer paid to deal with them. And guess what? You won't make that mistake again. You know what I mean? So there's a great adage that says, experience is what you get when you didn't get what you wanted.
Nice.
Right. So
Nice.
Experience counts for a lot. And, again, all the years I've been doing this, the one thing I do have is I have experience. There's people who are better bass players than me, better songwriters than me. They do a lot of things better than me. But the one thing I do have over many of them is I have experience, and, when I look to Steve Harris or the Kiss guys or, whoever, those who have, been trudged this road ahead of me, I look to them now at my age and I go, look, we can all play, right? We can all be on stage and the fans love us for what we do. That's great, that we have that. But now it's about sort of navigating these next chapters of our lives. Kiss have obviously done great with merchandising. Steve Harris is, we kind of walk a similar path because he's got Iron Maiden, I've got Megadeth, and yet we do other things. Steve has British Lion. Me and Frank Bello and Anthrax got to be on tour with Maiden and fly in the jet with them and do the whole thing in South America. And it's kind of fun. We're sort of brothers in arms on one level because we have these other bands away from our big bands. And when, you do British Lion, Altitudes and Attitude, my Ellefson band, whatever, you realize you're no longer headlining, you're no longer closing out Vakken and Download. You're the 1 PM slot. You know what I mean? And you're a newbie, just like every other new band on the bill, So, I admire people who can step down off the stage. Geezer Butler has done the same. So I admire my fellow artists, musicians, and especially those who have gone ahead of me, when they come down out of the high clouds of rock and roll celebrity and they just want to be a musician and play with some other people and write a record or go back out and, and realize you're just starting from the bottom again,
Yeah.
And I tell you what, it's easier to start at the bottom when you can always just go right back up to the top and go gig in your band again. I'm not going to lie. I've had both that. There's a season I wasn't in Megadeth and I was doing it on my own, and that gets cold, lonely, and dark quick. As I knew it would. I mean, I was under no delusion of that, but so again, I kind of get to do all of it, and you just learn by doing it, man. This is a business where you just learn by doing it. It's that simple, really.
Yeah, I think it's great advice. At the end of the day, you have to be ready to make mistakes. And I think with having even normal people in such public images anymore, being terrified of making that public mistake can be tough.
Yeah, you're going to piss people off. Not everyone's going to like you. You know, look, on some of these social media heavy metal websites, they love you at 10 a.m. and by 2 p.m. they're throwing rocks at you, telling you what a freaking asshole you are. You know what I mean? So it's like, screw that guy. That guy sucks, you know. And then, you know, meanwhile, in the morning, some post went up and they're, oh, this guy's awesome. We love him. He's our hero, you know. So you really... That's probably the other thing. Don't ever read the comments. Just shut that crap off, man. Go about your business, write your song, play your music, shoot your music video, do your interview, whatever. And just, you know, there's kind of a saying, do the footwork, leave the results to God. You know what I mean? And I think that's it. Do your part and then just move on. Get on to the next thing. Don't look back, you know?
Yeah.
You know, just don't look back, man. Just keep moving forward.
Gotcha. So in keeping with not looking back, let's look back.
All right, this one time we'll look back.
So with that, actually getting into the craft of bass playing and things, we talk a lot about technique and everything. Actually, I have a compliment for you that I think has been sitting for almost, good Lord, 20 years waiting to happen. But I believe you know Steve Bailey.
I do. Steve, awesome friend. Yeah.
Yeah. He's I worked with him at Musicians Institute, and we used to go over 3-finger style picking, and we used to work on it all the time. And he had just started messing with a pick. He was like, "Yeah, I keep trying this thing out." And we were talking about pick playing. He was like, "Yeah, I'm horrible at it." And I asked him, "Well, who's good at it? Who should you look at?" And he goes, "Well, in my style, not a lot of players play with a pick." And then he goes, "Oh, wait a minute." He goes, "Actually, David from Megadeth." He goes, "That dude's probably the best pick bassist I've ever seen."
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. I was like, wow, that's
I know Steve is very well. It's funny because so what you're talking about, and I don't have this plugged in, and sorry, I'm on headphones here, but what you're talking about, you know, Steve, who's a fretless 6-string fretless player, you know, he's really big on, you know, for instance, most people play with 2 fingers, and then there's this thing about, you know, can you play with 3? You know, again, let's use Steve Harris. You know, he does a bum, right? That kind of maiden figure. But he does it with 2 fingers. I don't know how he does it. I mean, Steve's a freak, man. I don't know. He's got like an extra bone in his hand or something. I don't know how he does it. It's amazing. And I think he kind of taps, you know, watching Nick Flight 666 movie. He talked about how he kind of taps. So I think if you're not really pulling the string, you know, and you tap it, you know, maybe that's our Steve Harris lesson for the day is we, you know, just to learn how to tap the bass. As Nico says, he tickles the bass. He tickles it, you know, so maybe that is it. But, you know, Steve Bailey, you know, we were talking about doing these kind of 3, even 4, and which is hard because the pinky's shorter, you know, so it's hard to even get that one in there. So you know, years ago when we were first starting Megadeth, when I met Dave, I was playing with my fingers. I'd played with a pick mostly growing up in my cover bands and original bands in Minnesota, just because I could hear myself, you know. I mean, even here, I don't know if you can even hear that just through the headphones. You can just hear there's a presence, you know.
Sure.
So in rock and roll, to me, it's always about teeth and bite and row, you know, coming out and grabbing you. You know what I mean? That's just, and especially with bass, to get through a wall of guitars and drums and stuff. So for me, the plectrum just created this tone that I can control. I can palm mute. I can dig in. I can punk rock. I can do all kinds of stuff with it. To me, it's a very versatile. It's more versatile than the fingers, in my opinion. And so, you know, that same thing, like, or, you know, you're playing 16th notes or something. So to me, and also just kind of picking up lines, you know, Holy Wars is the perfect example.
Sure.
You know, there's these lines that I don't care who you are, you can't play them properly with your fingers. You just can't, you know. You can act like you are or try to impress your friends and say that you are, but I'm telling you, you're not. It's just not going to happen, especially when you're under the microscope in the studio, you know, trying to play in time to the drums, dead on with the click, you know, and making records. You know, making records is where I grow the most. Every album that I've made, Megadeth or otherwise, that's where I, you know, that's like a year of college. You know, it's like a year of music school. We're making an album, you know, whether it's with Dan Huff, Mike Klink, Max Norman, even Paul Lanny, when we were cutting the So Far So Good So Well record. I learned so much on those earlier records, just about timing, not, because back in especially the 80s, we were all trying to impress each other and overplaying and really trying to just shred. And what really I got educated on in the studio was the right hand, the picking hand, and that's why I switched to the pick, because it first of all, it played better with the drums. It lined up better with the click track. I was able to pick up the nuances of what Dave was playing on guitar, this palm muting stuff that he's got, which is a real signature part of his style. And it made me a Megadeth bass player. You know what I mean? It really brought me into the heart center of the band, rather than Dave's guitar, drums, and then you got the bass guy over here doing this other thing. It's like we needed to all lock together. And that's something that only happens with experience, playing with guys. And, it's funny, Mike Portnoy, I think he said it best. The first record's always a ton of fun because it's new, you're fun. It's like first date, what could possibly go wrong? It's great. You're having a great time. Second record, well, all right, now you've learned a little bit about each other, the good, the bad, and the otherwise. And, hopefully the record label ponies up the money or whatever. And Mike said, he goes, making the third record, if you can make a third record, you've probably got something, it's more than a project at that point, then it becomes something of a real band. And so I took note of that when he said that. Of course, he's done a lot of these kind of records, and, so there's a lot to be said about that, about how you compose together, how you work together, how you agree to disagree, because everybody's not going to get along. Dave said many years ago, we were in an interview and somebody said something to the effect of, you two must just agree on everything. And Dave's like, no. He said, if we agree on everything, one of us is unnecessary, which I thought was a clever comeback, so, and I think it's true. You challenge each other, and it doesn't mean you fight over everything, of course, but it's okay to challenge each other and say, that's really good. How about we try this? Can we take it up? And sometimes it's like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Your original idea is better. Let's just do it that way. But being able to explore these things is part of collaboration. And it's just, I think, part of, for me, what makes the process of writing and making records exciting.
Got it. So it makes sense. Now, as far as, and this will be especially interesting for me, with your gear, and I know it's like one of the things I've always enjoyed about kind of watching what you do and everything is you seem to be very particular about your gear. Like I see you experimenting with things, signature pickups, moving to different amps and things. And I noticed like you have a signature pedal with, is it KDHK now?
Yeah.
I may have to do an outreach, see about getting one out.
Please do. In fact, it's funny. We're actually just doing another promotion on it because we launched a line of, the first kind of wave of those, and they sold incredibly well. The Fallout pedal. What's nice with that, I mean, look, Dave Karen is the tone guru, when he was with Randall Amps and then split off with Kirk Hammett to start the company. And the Fallout pedal, the thing, I'm not a big fan of distortion. As you can tell from my tone, I play very clean. Yeah. Clean as the board of health. You know what I mean? I want that thing super clean because I'm usually surrounded by a wall of distorted guitars. And so something's got to be clean and clear in it. And I used to, when I was growing up, I was the guy, we rehearsed on my farm where I grew up. My dad gave us a shed that we could insulate and put a furnace in it for the winter, and he helped me buy a PA. So I studied PA and low end and frequencies, and in low end, the enemy of low end is distortion, especially total harmonic distortion. These specs with speakers, with power amps. When I moved to LA, I basically brought most of my PA with me. So when we recorded Killing Is My Business and even Peace Sells, a lot of that was my PA from Minnesota. And when we did the first shows, when we launched Megadeth with Kerry King playing with us on guitar in early '84 up in the Bay Area, I had these JBL, I think they're the 45, are they the 4560 cabinets? There's a 4530 and a 60. I think they're the 60s.
I think it's the 60s, yeah.
Yeah, the one has the big scoop under it. It's not that one. But it's funny, in wood shop, I actually built 4 of those for my PA. because I noticed in Minnesota, in Minnesota, we had, when you were all rolled into a ballroom with your band, you had to bring everything. You had to bring your sound, your lights, everything. So I noticed these bands out of Minneapolis that were doing well and, getting paid well. They always had the scoop bins, the 4530s, let's call them that for now, underneath. And then they had the 4560s up above. And then they had some, a horn up above. So, I was really into, triamp PA. And so a lot of bass players were kind of getting into the biamp and triamp thing.
Yeah.
So I got into that. I went down that road. The problem with that is your bass will sound super awesome, like by yourself in your house. You're going, oh my God, my bass sounds amazing. And then you get in the room with all the guitars and the drums and your bass just vanishes because it's transparent. It's too clean. Hence the SVT. That's why that sort of P bass into an Ampeg SVT has sort of been a go-to sound for recording. We've grown up with it. Probably you and me, most of the records we've heard growing up. Because it has a mid-range growl. But here's the thing, and I learned this working with Dan Huff when we were making Cryptic Writings, in particular in the Risk album in Nashville. He talked about frequency maps, and I was already doing this. I just didn't understand kind of the science behind it. But what I was doing is in the room with whoever I play with, and in this case, Megadeth for 12, 13 years at this point, by the time we're cutting Cryptic Writings, with the pick, with my BC Rich bass, then the Jacksons, the PA system, which then became, the Harkey rig. And as my tone developed and transitioned, the thing I always heard in my head was I wanted the bass down inside the kick drum. So after the kick drum beater hits the skin, which you hear that concussion, that right behind it is a bass note. So I always say that, there's the concussion and the bass note is the cannonball that punches you in the gut,
Nice.
And you can feel it at big shows when you get the, the subs are pumping and they're beating on your chest, So that I wanted that. And then I needed that sort of top end clarity to get up over the guitars. And so in the Megadeth sound, Marshalls are dead center. We have and Marshalls are a very mid-range heavy, part of the frequency map, right? So I'm down here inside the kick, Dave and the guitars are here, and then I kind of scoop up around that and get up here. If you turn it sideways, it's what they call the California smile, right? Boosted lows, scooped mids, boosted top, right? Me and Victor Wooten have the same tone, right? In fact, I plugged into I grabbed his bass, and we were at a Bass Player magazine event. He said, let me grab your bass. I got this theory that you and I have the same kind of scoop in our tone, even though we play different genres of music. He pops and slaps and all that stuff, and I do what I do. So, but it's funny how our tone center and sort of the dial of our tone with this California smile is almost similar in nature. So in my case, again, just getting out of the way of the Marshalls, and then that builds the tone. Nice rich bottom, punchy mids on the Marshalls, and then a nice clarity of the top. And again, the pick helps with that. The pick helps, and the round wound string really gets that nice clarity up on the top there.
So do you find in the studio that you use the same gear that you do live, or do you tend to go more direct in the studio and then the gear is kind of recreating what you engineer on the album live?
Depends. The Megadeth records, I record a lot of them mostly with the modulus instruments. I started doing that back in 84 or 94 rather with Euthanasia. I used a Fender P bass that I have, a 78 P bass with a maple neck. And then the modulus stuff. Cryptic Writings was, I have a Spectre, a pre-Kramer, old Spectre NS2 that I did all the 4-string with. I did the 5-string with a modulus. Risk, I bought another P-Bass, a 76 Maple from Grun's Guitars. So the 4-string was done on that. And then the 5-string stuff like Prince of Darkness and that, I used a Sadowski for that. So that was a very more organic, kind of Fendery sort of tones. World Needs a Hero, I used that 76 Maple P-Bass from Risk. I used that for the World Needs a Hero. And then, into, the recent decades, let me think, 13 was a modulus, Super Collider was actually a Jackson import. It's so funny. We had one shipped to the studio over to Dave's place, Vic's Garage, and it was the earliest era of the Jackson signature stuff, and they were making them in India, and they were We've since moved to Indonesia, where we make them at PT Court now, the basses. But there was a lot of inconsistencies, and Dave just pulled it out of the box, didn't intonate it, same strings that had been on it, probably rusted out, from traveling. He just opened the box, plugged in, and he started kind of carving some demo ideas of the bass for me, right, on these songs. And so I grabbed the bass and I asked Johnny K, who was producing the record with Dave, and I said, "What do you think on the bass?" He goes, "I don't know, that one sounds pretty good." I'm like, "Really?" I said, I got to get the tech in here and get this thing intonated, because it was out of tune up the neck, I got to get it intonated. I think we finally put some new strings on it. I was like, okay, now it's a real tone. But I got to tell you, man, the Super Collider record has a very punchy, warm sound to it. It's a big sound. When I hear that record, we're at meet and greets and stuff, and it's playing on the stereo in the background. I'm like, God, that fucking record has great bass tone. And that's just from this kind of cheap, admittedly not great, early signature model. So again, some of the greatest tone I've got is not from super expensive basses.
Let's go over that all the time on the channel. I'm always trying to
Mike Brignordello, who played with Dan Huff in Giant and works in Nashville. He's one of the first call bass players down there. When we were doing Cryptic Writings, a lot of Dan's buddies were stopping by because they're like, "Whoa, Megadeth! Whoa, this is heavy metal!" Like, we were the first metal band ever to cut a record in Nashville, so it was big news. And so Mike stopped by and we're talking basses, and he said the same thing. He said, "Look, most of my records that I cut in Nashville, I use Fender because they have that mid-range. The mid-range it keeps the bass from disappearing and getting transparent in the track like a lot of the active basses do."
Yeah.
So, a lot of guys now, they'll use a Sans amp and stuff, and I'm not a fan of that sort of fabricated distortion. To me, if you want distortion, plug into an SVT, turn it up, get the thing angry. Because there's nothing like a freaking angry SVT. You know what I mean? Like, that's a tone in and of itself. And it's usually not for me, but if you want that tone, in my opinion, that's the place to go. And I think with the Fallout pedal, back to that, that's for me is I don't use it in the track. I use it live mostly as a sort of, I punch it as a volume boost and put a little bit of grit and some distortion on it, because it just creates an interesting tone. As sort of a lead boost, if I'm playing like a lick, it sort of jumps the volume, it adds a nice tone, and then as soon as I'm done with the part, I pop out of it, and then I'm back into my normal bass tone.
I'll definitely have to see if I get one in here. That'd be a fun review to do.
Sure, please do. Yeah.
A total nerd question for you.
Sure.
Because I was all into gear coming out when P-Cells had such a huge effect on me.
Yeah.
And I obsessed about your gear list on the original back of the vinyl.
God, isn't that funny? I forgot we put that on there. Yeah.
What Ashley preamp you used?
Oh, so that was my PA. So it was the Ashley preamp. Man, I'd have to look that up. It was an Ashley preamp, because then I went into these AB Systems power amps, which are real clean. It was kind of like, you get the what is it, the BG? There was the BG. There's Crown. Yeah. And I found the Crown is a fantastic sound reinforcement power amp. It's too clean and not musical for me. And it's funny you bring that up, because we were on the Cryptic Writings tour, and Peavey I just started using Peavey stuff. They had some great the TVX 810s that were ported.
Yep.
Super loud, powerful cabinet, and they had these 1,000-watt digital bass amps called I think they were the Kilo, right? It's 1,000 watts.
Yep.
Problem with it is they put inside the amp something that when it started hitting these digital spikes, it would shut the amp off, which is perfect for a PA system. Like, if you start hitting spikes, you want it to kill the amp so you don't blow your speakers out, right? Yeah. But with a bass, it's the opposite of an SVT. You need to get the amp mad and that's part of the tone. So I got some Mackie. I think they were the 1440i. Mackie had some power amps, and our front of house guy was doing some consulting with Mackie at the time. So he got some Mackie power amps set out to me. So I ran through the front end, the preamp of the PD Kilo bass, preamp out into the Mackie amps, and then out of the Mackies into the, I had 4 of the PD TVX 810 cabinets. Nice. And that was a wonderful sound. Those Mackie 1440s, that was a very musical sounding amplifier. It had a nice warmth to it. And that's when I also learned from the sound guys on the tour that year that the worst thing you can do is underpower a speaker. That, because I was going, man, it's 1400. That's more. I mean, those cabinets I think had 1,000-watt rating or something. They're very
Yeah, they were beasts.
at 4 ohms, I think, right? So I remember we were overpowering them, and they said, look, overpowering is better than underpowering. When you underpower, you can potentially fry voice coils in the speakers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, interesting. I did not know that. So it's always better to overpower a speaker. And man, I tell you what, I mean, we literally had that thing operating at 2. I mean, we had the power amp wide open, so we're giving everything to the speakers. But the preamp, I mean, I swear to God, the preamp on the PV was at like 2. And I mean, we were playing frickin' arenas and stadiums. I mean, you know, that thing was loud as shit, man. It was frickin' powerful.
I remember those. Well,
Yeah.
I know you have, you're kind of short on time today. I had, our last question will be for our patrons and everything, and that'll be about some composition things in between
Okay.
a song like The Conjuring and My Last Words.
Okay.
So if you want to catch the end of this question, that'll be on the patron pages. But for this section on the main channel, thank you to David, and we'll catch you all on the other side here.
You're welcome. Good to chat.
So thanks again to Dave for coming in and sharing such a treasure trove of information about playing and the music industry and all the other topics we covered. So hit me up down in the comments. What did you find the most interesting about the interview, and did anything surprise you, or some new information that you feel really expanded your knowledge or may help you out as a player or a professional? Love to hear it and love to talk about the information Dave shared with us. There's a lot to be talked about. Links to everything down below for the patron-only segment that we continue the interview on, and to his profile and my track analysis of My Last Words in The Conjuring. So I'll see you down in the comments. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you next time.